How's everybody doing this morning? Everybody's awake, ready to go? Okay, well, we appreciate that. Of course, you might want to sleep through it, I don't know. Oh, yep, this is it. First of all, I want to thank Mark for inviting me here, Range for providing a nice facility for this presentation. If you were at GITA Oil and Gas last year, you probably will recognize a couple of these slides. I was able to utilize it, but as-builting and streamlining that process, it's one thing to go out into the field and to dig holes in the ground and cut pipe out and put it back in, but it's another thing to try to get all of that data back in so that you can get it in a GIS and then represent it back out to see what in the world they did. And when you run reports, that was one of the things that we had. When you run reports, obviously engineers, they're kind of picky about that. They want to know, well, what is that? No, we took that 1940 pipe out of the ground, and you're still showing 1940 pipe. So it was a big process for us. I'll give you a little bit of history of the company. We operate not only transmission pipelines, we have storage pipelines as well. We have, you see the companies that are there, the midstream companies. Columbia has if you will, a 100-year history of a multiple. We've integrated, and it's a conglomeration of about 10 different pipeline companies over the 100 years. That creates one issue on the record side of things, but it also, it helps us to see that we operate more than 15,000 miles of pipe, 19 states, as we said, storage facilities. This is kind of our footprint. Those that are in the gas business, you recognize probably our footprint in relation to various other companies. We operate a capital program. There is a maintenance program. There's all kinds of programs that are out there. Our group at Columbia in Charleston, we manage everything, all of the work orders, what we call work orders that change pipe, change facilities. All of that data comes into us. So for all of the 15,000 miles of pipe, it comes into our office, and we have to maintain the GIS in that. This was just a snapshot of 2011 projects. It says 245 different projects. In 2012, that went up. It was over 300. In 2013, it is well over 300 projects. Nearly 400 different pipeline projects will be happening on our system. We've taken on that, and as many know, we are undertaking what we call a modernization program as well. So there are some priorities, and that's a whole different bucket. So the challenge is getting all of that data about what's happening in the field that's changing your facilities, getting it back in so that you can properly represent it in the GIS system. You can imagine what that's like. I use the illustration of we dinged ourselves basically several years ago. We put in this nice new pipeline system, I'll just say up in the Northeast, and it had been in service flowing gas for well over 2 years. And we had an auditor who was asking questions about this pipeline, and I couldn't show him a map that showed him where it was. That'll get you put in the crosshairs pretty quick. So he wanted to know why do I not see that there? I said, well, I don't have no paperwork. So you've heard the expression before, there are no jobs finished until the paperwork is done. We used to have ones that thought, I put the pipe in the ground, I've welded it up, I put the dirt on it, it's environmentally remediated, and I'm done. Well, that's good for him, but you realize that you have to still get paperwork and get all of the records in. And we'll talk about it a little bit more as we go through. Regulations that have come upon the gas industry have really forced us all to really pay attention to how we monitor and how we track things and how we record and how we store. It's one thing to say you're storing records, but how you get it back out. How do you make that available to someone that absolutely needs to see what happens? If an incident happens on your pipeline, how are you going to recover and find what was there? How can you validate that? This looks like an exaggerated picture, but this is no joke. This is what we used to get in our office. We did another project, replaced a large several miles of pipe in the Northeast, and it wasn't the same pipeline, by the way. We did a replacement, and it's no joke. We got 7 boxes like this of information in for one pipeline project. Now, typically, they would have to, in the field, they would have to run copies. They would have to copy all this information because this group needed to have it for the life of the facility. In the field, this group needed to have it. We needed to have it, so they were making copies. Well, that got old pretty quick, and that really is what some of the boxes, some of the data that we had coming in looks like. Projects, as you can see here, project completion packages varied in quality and timeliness. We did have those that took very seriously their responsibility to document everything as it was. Sometimes you had people that would send you sketches in that says we replaced from here, straight line to there. And that's what you put in. And so searching through, trying to find something that helps you put data in that, in your system, it was a challenge. So obviously it came to need to try to standardize things. You'll notice in bold there too is the phrase, the lack of confidence. We were accused more than once. Well, we sent that data to Charleston. Charleston became the black hole of information. We sent it in, it was there, and you just can't map. We heard all kinds of things. So again, it really, you see some of the things as it was happening. Lack of transparency. What was out there? What is going on? Project completion packages were often an afterthought, and that, and you may have experienced that. Trying to, once the ditch is covered, trying to find out something about that was a challenge because you'd have to contact the project manager or somebody on that job and go back and ask them questions to help you to build it correctly, and they're on another job. So it really was a challenge, as probably most of you all have seen. The administrative burden was too. Scheduling nightmare, that was an absolute. We did not know what was coming in. Didn't know what the backlog was. And a backlog, to us, the way it was formally set up was this. We knew we would get completion reports in our office, and we could manage those like nobody else. We knew exactly how many completion reports was in our office. In our little pond, if you will. I used that expression before. In our little pond, we could track, and we knew exactly what was in our office. We had no idea of the tidal wave that was behind us. So there was not a connection between what was out there in the field, what was budgeted. You saw previously in the slide the list of projects. The only thing we knew was what came in our doors. We didn't know what was outside our doors. We did not know, there wasn't a connection between that. So obviously you see where things had to happen. We could be looking for data and looking for information on a project if we heard about it, but there never was a connection that said if that project was ever canceled. So we were trying to, you just ended up being kind of a chase your tail type of thing. With the GIS, it could be significantly out of date. And again, given the regulation world that we live in, you don't want your GIS out of date significantly. You don't want it out of date at all, but you don't want it significantly out of date when you're being asked to report on things. We have the various other, I mentioned the modernization project. We're looking at through 2012 through 2017 actually now, is modernizing our facilities, getting rid of bare steel. We have some pipe, that's still bare steel that many companies are dealing with. But as you see, according to this slide, there are many impacts downstream. When you tout your GIS as a source of pipeline data that people can go to, well, you want it to be the source, the up-to-date source of things. You want it to be the updated source. And so that's exactly what we, like I said, we ran into is finance looking from their side of things, engineering looking from their side. Everybody has their own interest on that piece of steel in the ground. So do you have it represented properly? Do you have it represented the way it should be? And especially in light of HCAs and various other type of regulatory things that are going on, we really needed to sync up those processes. Obviously, the need for technology, being able to use technology to help alleviate some of the disconnects that was happening between the project managers and the GIS. Looking at some of the disconnects between being able to find this information. The last bullet point there, better track the progress of capital projects, completing them. That's very important because money's tied to that. When you get that completed, if you can get that finished, then you're saving money to hurry up and to get it put into your GIS system. This is some of the technologies we use. You've got the scoping, the planning. GIS plays in there. Projects. We've used various things. We use a Maximo system. It's one thing to say you're going to integrate GIS and Maximo, but which one's right? You see, there's still that disconnect. You have to make sure that your data is right. It's getting put in correctly. What we created was a system called Project Packager. And we developed that to try to help project managers and those admin support project teams to be able to find a repository so that they could start putting in their data. They could actually start scanning, they could start attaching, they could start putting that documentation. All those boxes were going away. You could actually have a repository where they could actually electronically put all of that information so that it would make it easier, and anybody at any time could go in and see what the progress was of that particular project. As notice there, it says it continually syncs with the server to keep documentation compiled. That was one of the things that we mentioned earlier, was the thought of being out of sync. Well, if you have everything scanned in one location, then it was in sync. Everybody was looking at the same OpQual documentation. They were looking at the same test report documentation that you were, and it was able to, again, can't stress that enough, see where it was in the process of things. Support sign-off acknowledgement of all project stages. Sometimes you find project leads, well, I didn't do that. Yes, you did, because you signed off on it. It has to have, in other words, the way we've set this up is it can be in a gathering documents phase, and it has to be okay to move to a project lead phase, and it has to be okay to move to the as-built phase, and it has to be okay to move. So we're able to track anything and where these projects are. One of the things, too, that you'll notice there, it provides a dashboard reports. One of the things that when we were developing this process or this project packager, was that it really started from an executive level. As they started to see and notice that things were out of sync, then they wanted to see, then where are these projects? So we created a dashboard level that let them see quickly, these are how many projects that are in a certain year, and these are how many that are at the gathering stage, these are how many that are being as-built, these are how many that are complete. And it was able to tie that to the project leads as well. This is kind of a flow chart that we put in there to help us see. We create a checklist. You'll see that what happens now is at the end of a year, when they're getting ready and they're planning all of the projects for the next year, they put it in an application that we call Power Plan, which is actually a project in accounting. So they set up all of these projects that are planned for the next year. At the beginning of our year, what we do is we now take all of that information and dump that into Project Packager. So now we have a list of all the projects. So we can tell where a project is. Oh, you haven't even started this one. You haven't even begun to load information. We can also tell now if they cancel this project, well, that can be canceled. So you kind of get a real more closely aligned, I hesitate to say live shot, but it's as close to live as we can get as far as understanding what projects are out there. You kind of see the flow chart there. if a work starts, they can start. In other words, a project lead, when you see that electronic checklist, not all jobs require the same thing. For instance, not all projects require a FERC certification, or they require all of the data elements that every project. A dig, for instance, doesn't require all the things that replacing miles of pipeline does. So that checklist is important. So as they begin and they assess that project, the project lead can go through and he can check off that this project's going to require this environmental work, it's going to require this certification, this permit, this OPQUAL, it's going to require all of these. Once that's checked, then he has to make sure that project won't advance until all those things that is checked get something attached to them. So in other words, when you try to save a project, you try to advance it, it says, well, you checked me and you don't have anything attached to me, so what are you going to do? So again, it's a kind of a reminder for them to do that. What it allows them to do is, as they get documents finished, as certain things are done, they can scan those and attach those to Project Packager. Now they're part of it. So that if anybody has a question, they can go into that project and go to that attachment and see, oh, okay, we've already got that in there. Or no, we need this updated form. So again, you just you can read that there, and you can see all of the things that goes through. But when all of the documents are attached, and there are certain things that we require come into our office, for instance, the actual red lines that they do for the project, those have to come in, the originals have to come into our office. They can scan them and attach them to Packager, but that and the test reports, the real live test reports, have to come in. The hard copies have to come into our office as well. Once we see that all the components that are there that are needed to build it into GIS, we make sure that they have the begin and end stationing, where it starts and stops, what they put in, the test for that, the MTRs for that. Once we see that all that documentation is there, we'll QC that to make sure that it's there. Then we move it on to the as-builting phase. So now somebody can take that, they can start building in a version. They can start building that in GIS. Once that version we have a version database, and so what happens then is, once they do their piece, then they move it to what's called the technical data and design, the final approval. We get a notification that says, we've done this work, you can go in and QC it. After it's complete, everything that was attached to that project gets uploaded into a document management system. So anybody throughout the company that has access to that document management system can go back now and see, if they need to, all of the documentation that was part of that project. The query tools, web reporting, document retrieval, MLP verification, a future map viewer, we're looking at that as well. These are all things that are made possible because we were able to standardize that process. One of the good things about Project Packager for us was it doesn't care what you attach. You'll notice the third bullet item there lets you attach various file formats. Sometimes we get data that comes in GPS, the CSV files, or any other kind of spreadsheets. You can attach those spreadsheets. If they take pictures, they attach those pictures. So you can attach everything. The only limitation is each attachment. It doesn't care how many attachments you make. I've seen some that come in that says under the as-built tab, they may have 120 some different attachments. The only restriction is it can't be over 50 meg a piece. If you try to attach something that's larger than 50 meg, it hisses and spits at you and tells you to try it again. So you just have to split it up. But again, you're able to put all of the data together that's needed to build that project. So whether it's spreadsheets, whether it's pictures, whether it's PDF files, whatever it is, then we're able to do that. And again, the first bullet item there manages workflows between different users. So again, through a quick visual, you can tell where that project is in its cycle. You can tell where it's done. And that's one of the things that I'm responsible for, is making sure that all this backlog, all this stuff that comes in is quickly moved through the information, or is moved through the system. Let's see. There's an example of the checklist that's done. The as-built drawing, you'll notice the highlighted yellow. Those are the things that we require to come in our hard copy. This is what it looks like in Packager. It fills out all the appropriate information. You'll notice here the little numbers. This tells me how many attachments are under each. So if you click on that number, it'll bring up all of those attachments. You choose which one you want. Again, documents are gathered through the course of the life cycle, through the project cycle. There are 30 days before. There's certain timing that has to happen. If it gets to this point, you need to have this already done. So it again helps you to manage all of that information. Process flow, we've dealt with that. There, being able to go through that. Again, it allows anyone to see where it is and what it is. Anyone that has access to Project Packager can get in and find their project, find a project, and look at it and see where it is in the system. This is just an access. I'll skip through these. There's the example of the dashboard that lets you see by color quickly how many of these projects are. You'll notice 597 projects. My boss looked at that and said, you only got 51% of them complete. Where's the rest of them? So again, we start looking and going back to the project leads and say, you've got these that are still in yellow, still in the gathering documents phase. Have you moved them on? And really, that really helps the project leads, because they say, oh, we got to make sure. So the responsibility goes back on them to do that. I'll skip through this. This is just kind of the methods or the things that you can do. It shows you when a project was approved. There's always a history. There's an excellent, oh my goodness, that was kind of like, we put this slide in here because finding MLP verification documents. I don't know if you all have to deal a lot with that, but we did. How do you verify the MLP on your pipeline? A lot of times you have to go back and find those original test documents. And this has really been very helpful, because you can go back and you can find them, or you can look for them. We got a lot of benefits that already at Columbia in that. This big one here, save space in file rooms. We used to have one complete office, one complete floor. It was about the size of this room. It was full of files. We called it the room of knowledge, that had all these documents that we came into. Well, they took it all off site. Fortunately, we scanned it all. Now it's in the document management system. So anyway, that's my spiel for what we've done on our as-built, to streamline our as-builting process.